All right, so far we have created our dome shape, so our hollowed form. We created eye sockets. We added any kind of extra clay to create that three-dimensional volume to anywhere on our face that we needed it. So we have brow bone, nose, cheeks, chin, lips, etc. So we created all of our form, put in our eyes, and now we're starting to create the details. So this is when all of your tools are going to come in handy. So your popsicle sticks, your loop tool, even the ends of your paintbrushes, and of course scoring tools. So we'll want all of those tools nice and handy today. So a couple things that we'll want to start doing is going in and modifying any of the forms. So if you need to adjust the nose, the form of your bridge, create your nostril shapes, so just taking, molding and modeling that clay and creating the shapes that you wanted. So we've got our cheek shape, our nose, nostril shape is good to go. So a couple things that we can do next is start to go in and kind of modify the eye. So on our eye, originally we probably just had this flat surface. So most people have a crease. So on their top eyelid, they have a crease here where their eye, the skin folds back and you have that little crease. Some people's are a little bit more prominent, some have large, big, but it's up to you. So using your modeling tools, popsicle sticks, you can go in there, poke that in, and create that little crease form. And then if they have, hooded eyes or anything, you can adjust that. So creating that little crease, of course, then you can go in and start adding any wrinkles, details, lines, anything that you would want to add underneath. For the nostril, if you haven't already done that yet, now would be the time. Hopefully the clay is not quite so sticky this time. And you can use the small end of a loop tool to simply scoop out a little bit of the nostril. We don't need to totally hollow everything out unless you have quite a large nose and you wanted to hollow it out that way instead of hollowing out from behind. But just take note of a nostril shape. Usually you don't want to just take a tool and shove it up the nose, right? Usually our nostrils are a little bit more elongated, kind of more bean shape. So follow the shape and you can scoop it out just enough to give a little bit of a cast shadow in there, okay? And then otherwise going around and adding any other surface textures. So I wanted to talk about wrinkles or folds in the skin. So again, you can either use your fingers or your popsicle sticks to kind of get little creases. And again, your shadows are going to be doing a lot of the detail for you. So without even doing any glazing, you're going to be able to see things are looking a little bit more realistic. But if you wanted to create any forehead creases, details, you of course could just take your stick and kind of start poking in and rounding them out. Another option is similar to what we did with our lips and our eyelids, is creating a really thin coil, laying that down somewhere on the forehead, okay? Laying that down and then blending in one of the sides. So if the skin is folding down or folding up, but you can create that kind of flap, blend in one side, let that kind of grow up, and then you could create another wrinkle on top. So once you blend in the top, you can put down another one, kind of like waves. Waves come crashing down, and blend that in and repeat, so forth and so forth. Okay, so you can create those little kind of protrusions that way, similar to, feathers, scales. So starting with the bottom, always start with the bottom one, blend that one in, and then you can layer on top and keep adding, and stagger up. All right. So you can do that anywhere else you would like on your face. And then otherwise some other textures. So most likely if you wanted to create some eyebrows or mustache or include any other kind of hair, we want to have a contrasting texture. So we should already have a brow bone, so that actual form that's protruding, but we do want to create a little bit more volume for our texture. So if you don't necessarily have enough, sometimes what I like to do is just take a little bit of extra clay and squish that onto the surface. So I've just got a little bit of extra clay to mold with. Again, blend it in. And then you can use your scoring tool, popsicle sticks, toothpicks, and just start going in there and digging around. Now remember, thinking about the texture and the direction of the clay, but if you continually go in there and just rough it up, overlap, you can separate it into little chunks, etc. But then you can start getting a little bit of extra texture and that 3D form that is starting to come out. So you're not just working on a smooth surface and drawing lines on your face. It's still not going to look as realistic as it would be physical volume kind of popping off. So you could do a giant unibrow here if you wanted to, or create a mustache or beard, anything that you wanted to create. But you can rough that up and create textures wherever it is that you wanted to. So some contrast on your form so everything isn't totally smooth usually adds a little bit of extra character to your piece. Okay. So you can kind of start to see, the difference between all of the extra clay that was added to my piece and then rounding things out, adding some details, making things look a little bit more realistic. For the eye, you also have a couple options. You could just leave it completely smooth like this. If you plan on perhaps glazing it with detail, actually painting in different colors and glazing it realistically. Otherwise, sculpturally, what you want to think about is highlights and shadows. So another option is actually either using the end of your paintbrush or your loop tool and actually scooping out a section to create a shadow in your eye. So we have this dark area that's created in our eye, but it's just a scooped out section of the eye. So again, that's not necessarily in real life realistic. We don't have a gouge in our eye. However, this will create that shadow in black and white and make it look a little bit more realistic. So if you look at things just in black and white, that will create that dark shadow, and you could just glaze it white, glaze it clear, or stain it and still have it read as an eye. Whereas this one, if we left as is, it still looks a little off, kind of glazed over eyes. So your choice, which direction you would like to go with that. But then it's just going through, adding as many details, little wrinkles, scratches, smoothing things out, adding some little textures, and then starting to be creative with adding anything else you would like to do. So if you wanted to, add some little ears coming out of the side, those would be sculpted. So by hand, create a little section of clay, sculpt it. And again, you don't have to make it perfect, right? But you can think of creating the form of an ear, all of those different sections in an ear, making the earlobe, and then, sticking that on, okay? And usually for ears, it's best to at least blend in the back. So connecting the piece, blending it in the back so we get that growth coming out of the ear. And then you could leave that seam visible if you wanted to. If you want it realistic, this is looking a little bit floppy. Usually an ear is the height between the eye and the bottom of the nose or the mouth, so somewhere in between. But totally up to you if you wanted giant ears, if you wanted to add on little hands or little feet, Humpty Dumpty, you are welcome to add any of those little details. So if you wanted to add on a little hat, mustache, earrings, anything else that you wanted to create. Okay, so you can make it fun, add little details to it, and just keep in mind all of those sculptural elements. So when you're done with the face, so again, it depends on if you made it open on the top, sideways or if it's just flipped upside down. You do have a couple other options of adding to it. So if you wanted to create a whole head, you could create another pinch pot and finish the head and then go ahead and add some hair and lots of other details and have a whole solid head. But otherwise, these concepts are just something to keep in mind for the future when you're creating your larger scale sculptures. In the future, if you wanted to create something that was totally enclosed, so like this bear is totally enclosed, it's just a multiple pinch pots put together, and then making sure that we have an air hole coming out. So through the eyes, this little bird, same thing. We've got an air hole going through the bottom, air holes coming out. But you can, again, modify the shape of your pinch pot. You can use any other kind of building method, coil, slab. Otherwise, again, if you have something solid, anything, if you've added any other extra clay, any area that you might have added a little bit of extra clay to, make sure that you scoop it out from the back so that the inside follows the outside form and we don't have any areas of clay that's going to be way too thick. Otherwise, we're going to have shrinkage issues. If one is thick and one is thin, dries before or after, we might get cracks. And of course, if it doesn't dry out thoroughly or has air pockets strapped inside, it would explode in the kiln. Okay. So then that's it. Just going and adding anything else that you would want to do and have fun with it. Then when you're done, please make sure you photograph it and keep it wrapped up in a bag until we're either ready to turn them in or move on to our next project.